Okay, let's unpack this because usually when we talk about making a medical diagnosis or, I don't know, engineering a suspension bridge, there's this really comforting expectation of just undeniable precision.
No, absolutely. We naturally crave that mathematical certainty, you know?
Right. Like, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, and there's this jagged white line on a black background.
Yeah, the doctor just points right to it.
Exactly. They say, there is the fracture. It's entirely binary, right? It's broken or it's not.
Which is incredibly reassuring for the human brain. I mean, we want our problems to be visible, easily categorized, and solvable through some universally agreed upon formula.
Yeah.
Like if you follow the laws of physics, the bridge stays up. If you don't, it falls down.
It falls down. But then you step into the world of digital product design and specifically user interface or UI design, and suddenly that X-ray machine is just, it's completely shattered.
Oh yeah, the physics go right out the window.
Completely. We are no longer looking at undeniable physics at all. We're looking at a landscape that is just incredibly murky.
It really is.
It's this bizarre overlapping Venn diagram of visual art, behavioral psychology, hard-coded logic, and then, the sheer unpredictability of human emotion.
Which is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, really. Because in software, the equivalent of the bridge staying up doesn't actually mean you've succeeded.
Wait, really? Because if the code works, shouldn't that be a success?
Well, no, because a user interface can technically function perfectly. I mean, the servers are running, the buttons log the correct data, the pages load in milliseconds. Structurally, the bridge is sound.
Okay, right. The engineering is flawless.
Exactly. And yet the product can still be an unmitigated disaster because the human being on the other side of the screen simply hates the feeling of using it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the friction is entirely cognitive at that point.
Completely cognitive. The code works, but the user is frustrated, confused, or just turned off by the visual language.
And that cognitive friction, that invisible frustration, is exactly what we are going to unpack today. So welcome to the deep dive.
I'm really excited to get into this one.
Me too. And I want to say right up front, whether you are prepping for a brand new job in tech, or maybe you're trying to understand why your company's new application is suddenly just bleeding users.
Which happens a lot more than you'd think.
All the time. Or even if you're just intensely curious about the digital environments where we spend, roughly half of our waking lives now, this session is built specifically for you.
We are custom tailoring this journey today to break down the core design concepts, especially for someone who might just be starting their career.
Right. Or, frankly, anyone who wants to look at their smartphone screen with a completely new, hyper-analytical set of eyes. So our mission today is to entirely demystify what makes an interface actually work.
You need to strip away that illusion that great UI is just a sudden burst of artistic inspiration or, some kind of dark magic.
Right, the myth of the lone genius designer.
Yeah, it isn't that at all. It is a meticulous, deliberate, and highly calculated interplay of colors, typography, interactions, layout, and style.
It's like cooking a really complex dish, right?
Yeah.
You need the right ingredients, the colors, the layout, but you also need the experience to know exactly how they interact with each other in the pan.
That's a great way to put it. It requires a tremendous amount of unseen labor and a really deep understanding of human behavior.
So, to help us navigate this, we are pulling our source material today directly from a phenomenal text. We are focusing entirely on Chapter 05, which is titled What Makes Good UI, from the book Design User Interface.
And it is such a dense, valuable chapter.
It really is. We are going to tear this chapter apart to extract the absolute core of what makes UI good. Now, before we really wade into the deep end, I want to get the essential housekeeping out of the way because you genuinely need this resource.
You really do. It's foundational.
Exactly. You can find the book, Design User Interface, at this specific link. It's https://hype4academy.gumroad.com/sleazybook.
And we highly recommend grabbing a copy to follow along.
For sure. You can actually buy the book right now by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below. And while you are doing that, please follow for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content.
Your support is what allows us to keep doing these deep dives and analyzing these critical subjects.
Okay, business handled. Let's dive in. As we get into Chapter 5, we find that the author anchors the entire discussion on two critical foundational pillars.
Right. We're going to examine why good design must inherently be innovative, and simultaneously, why it absolutely must make a product fundamentally useful.
Which, it sounds simple on paper, but the text makes it incredibly clear that those two pillars are constantly at war with each other.
Oh, it's a massive tug of war.
But let's start right at the beginning of the journey, particularly for the junior designer. Because the text makes a very strong, almost cautionary point right out of the gate.
It does. It states that if you are starting as a junior designer, you need to use tested good practices first.
Right. Safe design methods, rigid guidelines. It is basically telling beginners to put the training wheels on, tighten the bolts, and just leave them there for a long time.
And that is a notoriously difficult instruction for a creative person to accept.
I can imagine.
Well, think about it. When you enter a creative field, whether it's graphic design, writing, or UI, your immediate instinct is self-expression. You want to prove that you have a unique voice.
I have to admit, I struggle with that advice myself. I mean, if I'm a junior designer trying to build a standout portfolio, or if I want to get noticed by a top-tier design agency, doesn't following rigid, established guidelines completely stifle my creativity?
It feels like it would, yes.
Right, like if I just do what everyone else has already done, aren't I just being boring on purpose? How does a safe, rigid design ever get noticed in a sea of millions of apps? If I want to make my mark, shouldn't I innovate immediately?
What's fascinating here is that the text is tapping into the paradox of mastery. True innovation, the kind that actually moves the industry forward rather than just causing confusion, only comes naturally with deep experience.
Okay, so you have to earn it.
Exactly. Think about the architecture of music, specifically something highly improvisational like jazz.
Oh, I like this. Okay.
When you watch a master jazz pianist play a completely wild, unpredictable solo that sounds like nothing you've ever heard, they are not just mashing random keys hoping it sounds good.
Right, it's not chaos.
No, they have spent thousands upon thousands of hours in a practice room playing incredibly rigid, boring, repetitive scales.
The training wheels.
Exactly. They understand the underlying mathematical rules of chord progressions so intimately that they know exactly which rules they can bend and which ones they can flat out break without the entire harmonic structure collapsing.
So if I'm understanding this, the specific grid systems, the standard button heights, the traditional placement of a navigation bar at the bottom of a mobile screen, those are the piano scales of UI design.
They are the scales. Safe design methods allow you to learn the psychological why behind the visual what.
The why behind the what. That's good.
When you follow rigid guidelines, you are quietly absorbing decades of user testing. You're learning how the human eye scans a screen, how visual hierarchy guides decision-making, and what kind of contrast ratios are actually readable.
So it's not just about making it look pretty, it's about learning human behavior.
Yes. And once you internalize those rules so deeply that they become second nature, then you can start experimenting. But if you try to break the rules on day one, you aren't being an innovator.
You're just designing something that is broken.
Precisely. The text is very explicit. Always start with the established good practices to protect the user from your own learning curve.
I love that phrasing, protecting the user from your learning curve. Because, I mean, if you mess up the navigation on a banking app just because you wanted it to look, edgy, the user doesn't appreciate your artistic vision.
No, they just panic because they can't find their checking account.
Right. The user's goal is never to admire the interface. Their goal is to complete a task.
Always. And that leads into another concept from the text that feels a bit daunting, honestly. The author writes that a great UI is rarely fully done.
The endless evolution of the UI. It's fascinating because if we think about traditional design, let's say a designer in 1995 creates a movie poster.
Right.
They finalize the layout, send it to the printing press, and 1,000 copies are hung up in theaters. The project is over, they can go on vacation.
It's static.
Exactly. But the text argues that a digital product is a living organism. It is an endless, ongoing process.
Because the medium itself is unstable. If you design a beautiful poster, the physical dimensions of that poster will not magically change overnight while it's hanging on the wall.
Thankfully.
Right. But in digital product design, the environment is in constant flux. An application that was perfectly, meticulously designed for the small screen of an iPhone 4 back in 2010 would look absolutely ridiculous and function horribly on a modern, massive, edge-to-edge smartphone today.
Oh, completely. The proportions would be so tiny.
Because user feedback and new innovative ideas constantly force updates, screen resolutions multiply, aspect ratios change, and operating systems introduce massive new paradigms, like the shift to dark mode.
And it isn't just the hardware changing, right? The text implies that the people using the hardware change too.
Yes, digital literacy evolves. Think about the early days of the web.
Oh man, the Wild West.
Right, buttons had to be heavily textured, with massive drop shadows and huge text labels that explicitly said CLCK here because people literally didn't know what was clickable.
We didn't have the mental model for it yet.
Exactly. Today, our brains have adapted to the digital environment. We understand that a subtle icon or a slightly different colored text string implies an action.
So the heavy-handed UI of the past is just no longer necessary?
No, so the UI has to constantly breathe, shrink, and adapt alongside the user's growing competence.
So the UI designer is less like an architect pouring a concrete foundation and much more like a gardener.
I like that.
You plant the seeds of the UI, you launch the app into the wild, but then the weather changes. iOS updates, user habits shift, and you have to constantly prune the branches, water the roots, and adapt the interface so it doesn't just wither and die.
The gardener metaphor is brilliant because it implies a continuous relationship with the product. You are tending to an ecosystem.
Right.
And the tools we use to tend that ecosystem have roots that stretch back much further than the invention of the smartphone.
I was hoping we would get to this. The text introduces the 10 rules of good design formulated by Dieter Rams.
Such a crucial framework.
For anyone listening who isn't a design historian, Dieter Rams is an absolute titan of 20th century industrial design. He's primarily known for his decades of work at the German consumer products company Braun.
Yes, starting back in the 1950s and 60s.
We are talking about a man who designed physical, tactile objects in the 1970s. Transistor radios, mechanical calculators, coffee makers, record players.
Physical hardware.
And yet, the author of our source material points out that these specific 10 rules, adapted slightly from physical industrial design, are currently framed on the walls of top-tier software design studios today.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is one of the most profound testaments to the universality of good design.
It really is.
Dieter Rams was figuring out how to lay out physical plastic knobs and aluminum dials on a stereo receiver, and his conclusions are now dictating where a glowing pixel should sit on a glass touchscreen.
But I want to press on the mechanics of that transition. How does a philosophy meant for a plastic coffee grinder perfectly map onto a digital to-do list app?
It seems like a stretch at first glance.
Right. They seem like fundamentally different mediums with entirely different constraints.
The medium has completely changed, yes, but the human being interacting with the medium has not changed at all.
Oh, the underlying biology of the user?
Exactly. How our visual cortex processes hierarchy, how our thumbs reach for a target, how our short-term memory manages cognitive load that is identical whether we are looking at a physical radio in 1975 or an iPad today.
That makes total sense.
The text emphasizes that the precision, the relentless attention to detail, and the careful planning required to not overwhelm the user are universal constants.
So, a poorly placed physical knob on a calculator frustrates you for the exact same psychological reason that a poorly placed digital button in an app frustrates you.
Yes, because it breaks your flow and forces you to think about the tool instead of the task.
So Rams was essentially mapping out human empathy, and we were just applying his empathy map to glowing glass.
That is a great way to synthesize it. And the text pulls two specific adapted rules from Rams to establish the absolute core tension of this entire chapter.
Right, so let's dive into that first and arguably most tension-filled rule.
The delicate balance between good design is innovative and good design makes a product useful.
Let's start with innovation. The text provides a legendary case study for digital innovation, which is the Twitter pull-to-refresh interaction pattern.
It really is the high watermark for UI innovation.
It's so iconic.
It was originally invented by a developer named Lauren Brichter for a third-party app called Tweety, which Twitter eventually acquired just to own that specific interaction pattern.
When I read that section of the chapter, I had this vivid flashback to the very first time I used that pull-to-refresh mechanic. It was wildly novel, but as the text perfectly describes it, it felt strangely natural.
Like it had always been there.
Yes, it was like discovering a new digital muscle in my thumb that I didn't know I had. Prior to that invention, if you wanted new emails or new tweets, you had to visually hunt for a tiny static refresh icon, usually those two arrows in a circle, and tap it.
Which is such a disconnected experience.
Right. Then Brichter comes along and introduces digital physics. You touch the screen, drag the entire list downward against an invisible spring, feel the resistance, release it, and it snaps back with new content. It was incredibly satisfying.
It was satisfying because it leveraged our real-world understanding of tension and release. But from a pure UI perspective, the genius of it, which the text highlights, is that it is an entirely invisible interface element.
Wait, invisible?
Yeah, there was no permanent button taking up valuable screen real estate. It only exists as a gesture.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
It solved a massive layout problem without adding a single pixel of clutter. That is why it became a universal, ubiquitous standard across almost every feed-based application in existence.
But the author also offers a pretty sobering reality check here. They point out that the era of discovering massive macro-level layout innovations like pull to refresh is largely over.
Yeah, the gold rush is kind of done in that regard.
Right. We generally know where navigation bars belong, we know how a profile page should be structured, so if the big structural questions are mostly answered, where is the innovation happening today?
The author points us directly toward the micro level. Since the basic layout patterns are mostly solved and standardized, the modern frontier of UI creativity lies in micro interactions.
Micro interactions.
We aren't trying to reinvent the steering wheel anymore. We are meticulously engineering the tactile feedback you feel when you turn the wheel.
Okay, so defining exactly how familiar elements affect each other based on user input.
Exactly. The text notes that defining how these elements respond is a massive playground for new ideas.
When you say micro interactions, I immediately think of the little haptic buzz on my phone when I toggle a switch in the settings, or how a button might slightly depress and change shade when I hold my finger on it.
Those are prime examples. Consider the action of liking a post on a social media platform.
Okay.
The base utility is simply tapping a heart icon. A poor, uninspired UI just flips the heart from a gray outline to solid red instantly.
Which works, but it's boring.
It works, but it feels dead. A masterful micro-interaction turns that tap into a moment of delight. You tap the heart, it swells slightly in size, bursts into a tiny millisecond shower of confetti, settles into a vibrant red, and delivers a crisp, subtle haptic vibration to your hand.
It's a microscopic, almost subliminal conversation between you and the software.
Exactly. The system isn't just registering your click, it is rewarding your action.
It makes the flat glass feel alive and tactile. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, the chapter quickly pivots to the counterbalance. Innovation cannot come at the expense of usefulness.
This is the gravitational pull that keeps designers from floating off into pure abstract art.
Right, the golden rule. Don't innovate for the sake of being different. The specific example the book uses is hilarious, but so poignant. It says, triangular buttons won't replace the classic rectangular ones anytime in the near future.
It's a great example.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's say I'm designing a high-energy mobile game or an app for an extreme sports brand. A triangle is edgy, it implies forward motion, it looks aggressive. Why can't I use triangular buttons to innovate the aesthetic?
Because you are entirely ignoring human anatomy.
Now, so
Let's break down the physical reality of a touchscreen interaction. When you design a rectangular button, you are maximizing the tappable target area for a human fingertip, which is inherently blunt and rounded.
right, our fingers aren't pointy styluses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A rectangle provides a wide, comfortable, forgiving zone. If a user's tap is slightly off-center, the rectangle still catches it. Now look at a triangle.
It tapers.
Yes. It is widest at the bottom, but tapers to a sharp point at the top. You have mathematically reduced the surface area of the button.
So it's literally harder to hit.
If the user aims slightly high, they miss the target, the action fails, and they experience immediate frustration. By trying to be visually edgy, you have actively degraded the physical usability of the product.
So I've traded away actual function for a split second of visual novelty. And the user pays the price with their patience.
Precisely. The source text is uncompromising on this. Usability is the absolute base of user experience, or UX.
If a product is not usable, the overall experience is inherently hostile, regardless of how innovative or beautiful it looks.
And when we talk about UI usability specifically, the author boils it mostly down to one primary mandate: clarity.
Clarity. Let's really dig into what kills clarity, because the text gives us 3 very specific examples of bad usability: decorative fonts, a lack of a grid, and eye-watering colors.
Let's take decorative fonts first. Imagine trying to read a dense 3-paragraph article inside an app.
Okay.
If a designer decides to use a highly stylized, swirly cursive font, Because it fits a vintage aesthetic they're trying to achieve, they have committed a cardinal sin of UI.
Because it's too hard to read.
They have drastically increased the cognitive load required to simply recognize the letters. The user's brain has to burn energy deciphering the shape of the alphabet instead of absorbing the actual meaning of the words.
It decreases readability, which directly kills usability. If a user can't read it, they can't use it. It's the ultimate failure.
And eye-watering colors operate on a similar axis of hostility. Placing neon green text over a vibrant red background creates a vibrating optical illusion that literally induces eye strain and physical discomfort.
It might grab attention, but it is functionally abusive to the retina.
Exactly. And finally, a lack of a grid means that information is scattered across the screen without structural logic. The user's eye, which naturally seeks alignment and order, is forced to bounce around randomly, unsure of what to look at next.
Which provides a seamless transition into understanding how we actually establish that order. The author introduces two more adapted rules. Good design is aesthetic, and good design makes a product understandable.
Now, the text makes a very interesting self-aware concession here.
Oh, about trends.
Yes. It admits that aesthetics are highly subjective and that visual trends have mutated wildly over the decades since the 70s.
Oh, for sure. What we thought was beautiful in 2010, like those highly textured, leather-stitched digital calendars with torn paper edges, looks incredibly dated compared to the flat, clean minimalism we prefer today.
Trends are ephemeral. The surface layer of UI is heavily influenced by fashion, but the text argues that the underlying truth of beauty, the structural foundation, has not changed at all.
So aesthetic beauty in design doesn't come from the texture of the button.
No, it comes from internal harmony.
Internal harmony. That sounds very philosophical, almost zen. How does a designer achieve digital zen when laying out a screen?
It's created by grids, typography, white space, and well-planned layouts. It is the difference between a house painted a trendy color and a house with structurally flawless architectural framing.
So an understandable UI is achieved when readability, proper visual hierarchy, and the appropriate content all align perfectly on that invisible grid.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to pause and zero in on something very specific from the text because I think it genuinely blows people's minds when they first encounter it in design theory. We're going to do a deep dive into the numbers.
Oh, yes.
The author explicitly brings up the golden ratio and provides the number, 1.618.
It's a magic number in design.
But for a listener who has never studied design or advanced mathematics, how does a single decimal number make things beautiful?
To understand the golden ratio, we have to look outside of software entirely and look at how human beings are biologically wired.
Okay, so back to biology.
The golden ratio, 1.618, is a mathematical proportion that appears universally throughout the natural world. It dictates the logarithmic spiral of a nautilus shell, the packing arrangement of seeds in the center of a sunflower.
Really? Sunflower seeds use this exact ratio?
Yes. Also the branching of trees and even the structural proportions of the human face and body. Over millions of years of evolution, the human visual cortex has been optimized to process these specific patterns.
So it's hardwired into us.
We subconsciously recognize this specific mathematical relationship as structurally sound, natural, and inherently beautiful.
So when a UI designer uses 1.618, they are quite literally hacking human biology. They are bypassing the user's subjective taste and appealing directly to their evolutionary hardwiring.
That is exactly what they are doing. The text explains that using 1.618 allows designers to set hierarchy in a natural way. Instead of just guessing what size a headline should be compared to a paragraph, you use the math.
How does that work in practice?
Well, if your main body text is 16 pixels and you need to create a headline that feels perfectly harmoniously balanced with that text, you don't just pick 20 or 24 because it looks okay.
Right.
You multiply 16 by 1.618, which gives you roughly 26. You made the headline 26 pixels. You use that same ratio to determine the width of your main content column relative to your sidebar.
It entirely removes the guesswork. It creates an invisible mathematical relationship between the elements on the screen that just feels right to the eye.
Even if the user has absolutely no idea why they find it pleasing.
And the text makes a massive promise here. It guarantees that designs based on these solid principles will always be more aesthetically pleasing than random, unstructured ones.
Because randomness on a screen reads as chaos to the brain. Chaos requires cognitive energy to decipher. The golden ratio provides absolute order, which allows the visual cortex to relax, letting the user simply absorb the content without friction.
And this mathematical foundation ties directly into another one of Rams's adapted rules. Good design is long-lasting.
Which is a tough concept in tech.
Yeah, I have to ask, how can UI possibly be considered long-lasting when digital trends change every 6 months? I mean, we go from flat design to material design to glassmorphism all within a few years. Isn't every app doomed to look outdated?
Only if the designer focused entirely on the paint job and neglected the foundation. The expert points back to the grid and white space. If those are precise, the design retains merit.
I want to talk about white space because I think a lot of people outside of design just view it as empty space that needs to be filled with something.
Viewing white space as empty space is a fundamental misunderstanding of design. White space or negative space is the breathing room.
The breathing room.
If we go back to our music analogy, white space is the silence between the musical notes. Without the silence, there is no rhythm. There's only a continuous, deafening noise.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
The white space is what frames the content and gives the eye a place to rest.
Yeah.
The source explicitly admits that yes, gradients and illustrations might age rapidly.
They definitely do.
But design precision and clarity never go out of style. A perfectly proportioned, highly readable interface designed in 2014 with meticulous use of white space still functions brilliantly today, even if the specific drop shadows look a bit retro.
And bones are what make it long-lasting. I love that. And that understanding leads us right into the fading UI.
Ah, yes. Unobtrusiveness.
So what does this all mean? The rules here are good design is unobtrusive, and good design is as little design as possible.
It is the ultimate demand for humility. The realization that nobody is coming to the app to look at your interface.
The source explicitly warns against falling into the trap of form above function, right? Especially with modern tools that make it easy to sugarcoat everything with colors and animations for a shiny portfolio.
This is a widely recognized pitfall, often referred to in the industry as the dribble portfolio syndrome. Designers will create these highly animated, neon floating glass-like interfaces that look absolutely stunning in a 10-second looping video.
But they are designing to show off to other designers.
Exactly. The author reminds us of the harsh reality. The fundamental role of a UI is not to be a piece of standalone art. Its role is to deliver content.
Let's analyze the Instagram app example from the text because it's a masterful study in unobtrusiveness.
Let's dissect it. If you ask someone to draw the Instagram app from memory, they usually just imagine the photos they saw.
Right. When you actually strip away the user-generated photos and look purely at the interface of Instagram, it's incredibly sparse.
It's almost aggressively boring. It is composed of a thin, light gray hairline border at the bottom, a few minimalist, one-pixel wireframe icons for a house, a magnifying glass, and a heart.
A tiny red dot for a notification.
The entire environment is mostly stark white space and basic black text. The UI is completely devoid of personality or flair.
Because if the UI had personality, it would clash with the product. The UI's actual look is far less important than the photos or videos inside it. The UI exists solely as a delivery channel.
Exactly. Imagine if a junior designer decided Instagram needed to be more innovative, and they added bright purple navigation bars, spinning 3D icons, and a heavy background.
It would violently clash with the colorful photos uploaded by the users.
The UI is the picture frame in a museum. The user is providing the painting. If the frame is covered in flashing neon lights, you can't see the art.
Less is always more. A great interface should fade away after a while. We stop noticing it, and using it becomes purely natural. Ornamentation negatively impacts the actual experience.
It's like a film score. The moment it draws attention to itself, the spell is broken. The interface is the invisible score to the user's task.
All right, moving deeper into the chapter, the author takes a very fascinating turn into the ethics of UI. The rule here is, good design is honest. And the text introduces a really compelling conflict regarding the white lies of UI design.
This section is so interesting. It forces us to confront the heavy tension between mathematical reality and human perception.
The source points out that a fluid, sinusoidal, anti-aliased graph looks much better than a jagged line, even though real data is usually jagged.
Real data is chaos. Plotted accurately, a daily stock chart looks like a terrifying, jagged mountain range of anxiety.
Wait, so are we supposed to be honest or make the user like the product more with these white lies? If the rule is good design is honest, shouldn't we be brutally honest? Isn't smoothing out data technically lying to the user?
You are identifying the exact ethical friction point. But the designer has to balance granular data integrity against cognitive load and the user's ability to comprehend the macro trend.
So it's about not over-promising in content-heavy designs.
Exactly. The designer's ultimate job is to make the product understandable. If showing every single microscopic, jagged, second-by-second fluctuation in a monthly portfolio causes the user immense anxiety, making the overall trend impossible to decipher, the UI has failed.
Ah, I see.
By mathematically smoothing the line, creating a curve that averages out the noise, the designer is creating a white lie at the micro level, but they are actually delivering a much more honest and understandable picture of the macro trend.
You are prioritizing human comprehension over raw data plotting.
Exactly. The white lie is a tool for clarity.
Now, while we are on the topic of making digital lines look smooth, let's do a technical deep dive. The text mentions that the fluid graph is anti-aliased.
Yes.
Can you explain anti-aliasing based on the text? For a listener who might have seen the word in a video game settings menu, what is the actual physics of it?
It's a brilliant microscopic detail. The source defines it simply, adding transparent pixels on diagonal and rounded edges so they look smoother from a distance.
Let me try to visualize this. A digital screen is essentially just a massive grid of microscopic square light bulbs, right? Every pixel is a rigid square.
Yes.
So if I ask the computer to draw a smooth circle or a sweeping diagonal curve, I am forcing the computer to draw a smooth curve using only rigid squares.
Which is physically impossible. If you don't use anti-aliasing and you zoom in on a diagonal line, it won't look like a line. It will look like a staircase, a series of harsh 90-degree jagged steps.
And from a normal viewing distance, that staircase effect makes the edge look crunchy and ugly?
It creates visual noise.
Oh.
So anti-aliasing adds a halo of semi-transparent gray pixels along the harsh corners of the steps.
So it is intentionally blurring the edge.
It is creating a highly calculated microgradient. When you zoom back out, the human eye naturally blends those semi-transparent pixels together, and that harsh staircase magically appears as a perfectly smooth, fluid curve.
That is incredible, and that tiny detail ties flawlessly into the author's next rule. Good design is thorough down to the last detail.
It is about applying the same rigor to the basement as you do to the penthouse. The expert highlights the importance of low-importance elements.
Right. A micro interaction on a checkbox, or the small X to close a window, cannot be an afterthought.
They discuss the source's tip to make even terms and conditions screens beautiful to show users you care about every pixel.
I have to admit that sounds like a waste of resources. Nobody reads the terms and conditions.
Because UI design is fundamentally an exercise in building trust. If your marketing landing page is a masterpiece, but a user clicks forgot password and is taken to a reset screen that looks completely broken, the user's brain registers an inconsistency.
Subconsciously, they start to wonder, if they are ignoring the basics, what else is broken?
Exactly. By showing meticulous care for every single pixel, you silently signal to the user that the product is built with deep competence.
Okay, I have one final rule to extract from the text. Good design is environmentally friendly. Now, how can pixels be environmentally friendly?
If we connect the digital interface to the massive physical infrastructure required to support it, it makes perfect sense. The source points out that virtual products affect the physical environment.
Where is the footprint?
It lies in server power consumption. Optimizing an app for faster loads directly reduces server power consumption. Systemic ways of building products make them faster and greener.
Oh, wow. So if a designer puts a massive 15-megabyte video looping in the background of a login screen.
Every single time a user opens that app, the server has to spin up and beam 15 megabytes of data. The phone's processor works overtime, draining the battery faster, drawing more electricity from the grid.
And if you have 1 million users, you are forcing data centers to burn massive amounts of actual fossil fuels just for a background video.
Conversely, if the designer optimizes their image assets and uses efficient code, the app is faster, the user's battery lasts longer, and the servers rest. You are literally creating a greener product.
The butterfly effect of a single kilobyte. That is absolutely incredible. All right, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's synthesize this journey we've taken.
UI is a path, not a goal.
It starts with rigid rules and the golden ratio, balances innovation with extreme usefulness, and ultimately strives to become an invisible, honest, and environmentally friendly delivery mechanism for content.
It really is a fascinating discipline.
Before we wrap up, I have to remind everyone of the source material today. Chapter 05. What makes good UI from Design User Interface?
A must-read.
The link is https://hypeforacademy.gumroad.com/coolwebook. You can simply scan the QR code in the description to buy the book. And please follow for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content.
And as we finally close out, I want to leave you with a final lingering question directly inspired by the text's rule that good design is as little design as possible.
The perfectly invisible picture frame.
Yeah, exactly. If the ultimate goal of a great interface is to completely fade away until we stop noticing it entirely, will the most innovative UI of the future be an experience with absolutely no visible interface at all?